view of process mining and intelligent automation. It's a real honor to have Calem Harris here with us. Calem, go ahead and don't share your presentation just yet. I'm going to ask you to stop showing your presentation screen for a moment, because I want to make sure the audience sees it, and I want to make sure that we acknowledge you. Calem is a systems engineer, has a background in science from the United States Naval Academy, Bachelor's of Science in the United States Academy, a master's degree from Henley Putnam University. He has spent the last 12 years implementing automated systems for defense, for healthcare, and for supply chain industries, with a focus on optimizing data utilization. So when we bring you Calem here, we're bringing a real leader and a real practitioner of intelligent automation. And Calem, on behalf of our global community, I'm deeply grateful for you to come here, share your expertise about this journey of intelligent automation with all of us.
Well, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I'm happy to be here and be happy to be in front of all of you discussing these opportunities. I think it's a critical part of all organizations universally, both process mining and identifying business opportunities. So I'm just very happy to be here and discussing these aspects with everyone. With that being said, I'll go ahead and kind of introduce what we're discussing today. Business opportunities with process mining and successfully translating into business value. One of the key things about our organizations is every single day, we are looking for opportunities to be able to either reduce our costs, increase our savings, or increase profitability. And all those are actually measurable, attributable valuables to data, right? We can utilize this data, then in turn, create projects or programs or systemic or organizational changes within our processes to increase the value which these things bring to our organization. So I want to highlight this as being a major part of organizations, just because each one of us, whether we're leaders or practitioners, need to understand these concepts and how to implement them successfully. Here's some of the key topics that I'm going to be discussing today. Number one is developing organizations' processes with the inclusion of measurable data. What does that mean? I think one of the key things about, before we start any organization or actually implementing a software programs or processes, we have to identify what we're trying to achieve. And this starts by developing those organizational processes and inclusion of those measurable data portions. Second portion is identifying the data points used for process mining to develop a business case. Meaning, which data points are we going to use to say this is what we're going to drive, or this is where our business case is going to come from? Or do we even have a business case at all? That's one of the other key aspects of it. Analyzing a potential business case through process mining, developing the business case, and I think most important is key performance indicators through process mining. All these things are kind of the life cycle of which we as organizational leaders are identifying opportunities for both business growth, but also the success of a project or program dependent on process mining. Okay, first, let me start off by developing organization process with the inclusion of measurable data. Why is this important? Key thing is, I think there's a great quote, Stephen Covey, author of a couple different practitioner books throughout all organizations, is if the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster. What does that mean to us? What that means is before we're actually setting up any type of system or processes, we have to evaluate what do we need to evaluate success. Otherwise, after we've actually implemented those processes or systems, we don't know how to measure our success, or we don't know how to measure how well we're doing. And that's a failure on us, our organizational leaders. So we have to be able to identify in the future, where are we going? And once we get there, how do we evaluate us? So let's look at the different event data for business cases. User, an end user is vitally important, right? And this could be across industries. An user can be a purchase online, so a customer. It could be someone inside a facility, whether it be supply chain industries, manufacturing industries. It could be in a software industry, right? You're having some type of user interaction where they're touching. Systemic data. Systemic data is in after a user inputs some type of characteristic or modification or change, that in turn turns to data from which other processes can then use. An autonomously derived data. I refer to this as more of like AI experimentation, meaning I'm using systemic data or multiple systemic data inputs to then evaluate what is the next step in the process or what output from that data am I using to then create the new process. And methods of deriving data architecture, that's another important aspect. Before we understand how we're building it, we have to look at what we're trying to achieve. I love these process flow diagrams, whether it be in software applications, whether it be in facility processes, because you have to understand where we're going to get, evaluate some of the exception cases that it may come about. So for example, I'm expecting process A to B to C to occur, but something could occur where it's preventing A to B step from appropriating properly. So I want to evaluate that as part of my data algorithms as well. And I want to have some type of systemic data derived to those exception cases. Database logging. Database logging is key. Key thing is that every single footprint we have within all of our industries, each should have some type of data point we can go back and evaluate. The key thing is database logging. When a user is touching a screen, when a user is making a transaction, how is our application actually logging that information to the data? Is it logging this information in a transactional form that we can use it? Simplicity is key out of this. We don't want to overlog to the point where we're unable to obtain some of the rich details inside. We want to make it simple. And reporting. Reporting is key because it allows us to evaluate trends. Trends meaning when we have certain systemic data flows, how are we trending? Are we trending towards the success we want? If I have a specific time between a user and a systemic data output, what is that time variance? Is that time variance important to us? It is, and it should be evaluated. And reporting on all these different aspects allows us to extrapolate this into a user-friendly form, especially when putting a business case together. Because when you're talking to investors or people from finance or organization inside your organization that you're saying, I want to build a business case around something, we have to be able to represent those key formats in a way that's user-friendly and everyone is able to understand, read, and be able to interpret that what business case we're driving to is going to provide value to the organization. Next key thing is what type of data, now that we've got the different types of data that we're looking for, what am I actually looking for to develop a business case? And this is something that we are looking for every single year when we're actually defining type of projects or programs or processes that we need to refine. We're identifying large gaps in events, history, or transactional data. That's one aspect you could be looking for. So between our process flows, where are we seeing these gaps to where we could refine? Or is a user spending too much time pressing different buttons? Are we seeing too much time in between when a user goes from one location to another location and presses another processee? We're looking at these key pieces because when we see gaps, what we're seeing is that we can refine those gaps, meaning we want to make them faster and quicker, especially time is money. It's an important aspect when looking at organizational processes. We're also looking at process flow discrepancies. As I kind of mentioned, when we're outlining all the different steps within our processes, when we're charting this out in these flow charts, we have to define where these discrepancies are. Now we can kind of foreshadow or predict basically as to what we anticipated being expected or unexpected scenarios from happening. But sometimes there are variations to this that we may not have expected. So I want to be able to identify what these process flow discrepancies are and why are they not executed as expected? Because those in themselves adds value. And then identify autonomously driven data results or AI or RPA type methodologies and compare against expected outcomes. And we can find that to be able to incremental differences. One of the key factors of some of the projects that we've worked on in the past is when we're building these large AI platforms, sometimes the algorithm takes a couple minutes to be able to run. And sometimes when we're identifying which type of data we're grabbing and pulling at specific moments will dictate and could alter the course at which the algorithm is expected to run. So for example, a good scenario is I'm pulling data sources in when these algorithms are running for a process. I'm capturing data at a specific second. Another second later, that data changes, and it alters the course and the outcome of which that artificial data was derived. Now, when we're actually going back through and evaluating how well our process is performing, we can see those incremental differences and compare that against what we were expecting. Now I know I had a flaw and could be able to alter the course of which and how this process is running based on some of those values. How do I evaluate it too? Another key thing is now we've identified like, hey, there could be differences. There could be opportunities here, but should I be relying on all this data? And the answer is no. Trend patterns to evaluate how long non-conformance has been occurring. So we have a particular pattern for which processes are expected to flow. What I want to do is now that we have this footprint or this data that ArcSys says, this is how my process is actually flowing. This is when things are occurring. If some of the data that I'm looking for is just outside what I'm expecting, meaning is this a one-time event or am I showing something that happens daily, hourly? You know, one of the key things is that we want to throw outside some of those outliers. Outliers will throw off our opportunities for business cases because what we're trying to, we don't want to grab the outliers that may be following a process that is not on a standard for day-to-day practices. Otherwise, when we're actually analyzing how our opportunity is performing, what value we're adding, we may not get what we're expecting out of the business case. And evaluate whether the data utilized is accurate to begin with. That's a very key aspect, as does the data appear to be pulled from an accurate source? Some of the key flaws when defining a business case is making sure you're using accurate data. Could you imagine what would happen to a business case if you're using inaccurate data? I can promise you, we've done this before. I'd say most organizations have. And sometimes as organizational leaders, we're also a little bit more optimistic. We like to lean into our business cases a little bit more, saying we're going to provide more fruitful value, and we pull data sources that aren't always accurate. So a key thing is accurate data. And going back to those the non-conformance data, are there any delta variants that should be excluded? So as in typical data analysis, we're going to take our highs and we're going to take our lows that are way outside of our normal processes and exclude those from our business case. We want to really refine the averages from which our business case data is pulled from. Next key topic is analyzing a potential business case through process mining. We've talked about the different data points. We've talked about what are we looking for to evaluate whether or not we actually have a business case. Now let's look at the key different areas of a business case. There's many different ways you can derive your business case, but I would say there's three ones that stand out in particular, especially to large organizations. Savings. How can we translate time into money? If you've ever worked with Lean Six Sigma practitioners, they literally are looking at steps. Every steps matter. In a facility, an industry, manufacturing, whether it may be, it is time equals money. Is someone spending too much time taking steps or performing a procedure to get to an end state in our process? Lower expenses. Another key thing is that when we're talking about time as money, I'm also talking about lowering basically the number of people or number of processes that are having to occur to reach that end state. So I want to be able to lower our expenses to accomplish the same end result. And efficiency. I look at efficiency as not as a linear path, but I'll look at it as multiple parallel paths or multiple threading of an application even to drive duplicity, increasing efficiency, to basically say, I don't want to split this from an A, B, and C process. I want to take this to an A, B, a part B, to a C. So I can have multiple different variations of the same process occurring at the same time to accomplish it in a shorter period of time. So that accomplishes savings. Or am I going after profitability? Profitability is the other key thing that we're looking at in an organization. This could be incrementally our margins, i.e., can I increase the cost of a different item based off some of the sales structures I'm seeing? How do I increase my sales? That's a profit of marketability, right? And also every type of campaign, ad, everything else that's submitted by these large organizations should and can be tracked. Is my sales a result of a product? I.e., are we increasing our product's sales through the way that we're building our product, or is it a result of a process? I.e., can we get a product or feature out to our customers in a quicker manner? And customer satisfaction. I never want to take away from this aspect because it's huge, especially in today's e-commerce world. Everyone is actually expecting things much quicker, faster, and to be more reliable. These larger companies are putting a lot more pressure on smaller companies just for identifying they have the money to be able to invest in the technology and capabilities to keep up with the growing demand. And the key thing is our customer satisfaction is changing from previous eras. Previously, we were looking at a value service, right? Quality products. And we didn't mind taking delays because we understood that there was shipping cost or system issues that could occur or manufacturing delays. Now that's different. There are so many different ways to communicate and expand supply chain technology to be able to get a product to a customer quicker and more reliably. And I also want to take a step back from the quantitative features. Quantitative features are the things that we can use to be able to build a strong business case because it's something that we can be able to represent to investors and stakeholders. But the qualitative is another key aspect to look at an organization. Employee satisfaction. Organizational leaders understand the value of strong employees, and they also understand how much time it takes to train, get someone operating into their processes and up to speed with how the processes are performed. So they want to be able to retain those employees. So employee satisfaction is big to me. Customer satisfaction is also another key thing. We want to make sure that we're not only delivering reliable results to our end user or customer, we also want to make sure that we're getting the feedback retained within those processes to make us either change what we're doing or refine our processes to get them their products. Developing the business case. How do I effectively define my business case value? Now that we've identified which project we're going after, whether it be savings, profitability, or going after qualitative measures, I want to understand translating the data to time, which equals money. How much time could my organization save? I've discussed in the past as to when you're looking at processes, I want to have every single footprint in data form. I want to be able to represent this and extrapolate this data into time between different events in my processes. As mentioned, this could be software, this could be inside of industrial warehouses. I want to be able to articulate and define how much time can my organization save. And I also want to say, what are the salaries of those that are affected by this time? I.e., if I have employee A who makes a certain amount of money per hour, and this person is spending this amount of time performing this process, I want to evaluate every single input that user is having regarding all the processes they're performing. And I want to evaluate if I was able to modify their process design by this amount, how much time would that save? Using the input that I have available from my data analysis. I can then translate time times salary equals a savings. That's what I'm looking for. That allows us to start building a business case. Profitability, same exact definition or a different way of looking at it, is translating the data to profitability. How can changing our processes affect my expenses? I want to look at manufacturing. For example, when I look at a processes as to this is when my equipment arrives. This is when I actually utilize that equipment. This is how long it takes to take parts A, B, and C to combine them together to end up with our end product to the user that we're going to customer sell. How much time does that take? What are the factors that are affecting that time? And is there a way to actually reduce the amount that's actually affecting it? That includes even changing materials, right? Some different companies may ship out at different materials different times. If I can get it faster from another vendor or manufacturer to include in my product, I can actually reduce my costs there as well. And how many customers do not purchase items through a potential process, and how many potential business did we lose? I look at this to go back to a systemic portion. We talked about the manufacturer sort. Let's look at it from systemic. When a user is going through a checkout portion of any type of online or e-commerce procedure, at what portion do they stop? We can track that in event logs. When a portion actually, I add this to my cart, I add this item to my cart, I get to my checkout, and then I stop or I pause. Or how does they individually, do they scroll? Do they look at other different items? But eventually, they don't purchase the items. That information is vitally important to sales because, not to mention, we can track how a person is utilizing our applications and then evaluate how much potential business are we losing through this. So cost of what we could have been able to have and the utilization is what business do we lose equals profitability. So I think that also helps evaluate the business case. And translate the data to business value. And here's an example for this, for the qualitative too. How many employees do we lose to a potential process flaw? Either hiring or training, or it even could be I am through employee feedback on their exit interviews leaving. They departed for these different reasons. Process flaw reduction equals value. And evaluating the cost. That's the final key piece. Is what are the costs associated with modifying my systemic processes? Is it software modifications that's required? Am I having my users click too much before they've actually reached the end process? Can I provide an autonomous method of delivering results to a user that's quicker than having my current structure of utilizing that data? Database architecture. This is another key aspect, as I mentioned, is sometimes we're architecting our data in a format that makes it a little bit too difficult to pull out the end results that we're looking for. So do I need to define this database architecture? Do I need to develop more views? Do I need to be even how the queries are running against a database to make it more efficient? Is my algorithms or even AI technology taking too long to pull the results desired? Or operating system. Am I not getting the feedback that I need within an operating system? Could I be switching to another operating system that has a higher performance rate that could be optimizing my system a little bit faster? Or another key thing is going from a systemic portions to a physical process. Hardware and space, as mentioned in each industry, we have that physical aspect too. Are we taking too long to allow our customers to check out? Are our items spaced out too far to where a customer is walking too far distance between one liked item to another liked item? Could we allocate those different items into a space that allows it more user for a customer to be able to identify and find those items and to be able to sell those items? Or workspace. When I'm actually a user, let's say I'm working at a checkout aisle, could I be doing two things at once rather than waiting on one thing to complete? All these different factors are important, even in physical. Layout, as I mentioned, there's many different ways in which a person can be able to utilize their space more efficiently. And rearranging that space could be able to help. And what are the costs associated with changing my manufacturing costs? Equipment, do I need to be switching to other type of materials that are a little bit easier to mold, or are they a little bit easier to manufacture? Materials, so do my materials costs change? Do I watch those materials costs gradually go up or gradually go down? Could I be purchasing those materials from other different things? And could I be using equipment in ways that can automate things a little bit more efficiently? Working in supply chain industry, a lot of the things we're going after today is all about automating. And that could be utilizing robotic arms, AGVs, whatever it may be, is some type of autonomously driven outcome. And finally, it's real simple equation for this is return on my investment to build a business case. That's the number one thing that any type of investor or stakeholder is going to ask and wanting to understand is what is my return on investment? It's very simple. Your profits divided by the cost of your investment times 100%. Or if you're looking at your overall process for a business case over multiple different years, current value minus your cost of investment. So very easy math to do for an easy outcome. The key lies in the actual data to be able to build the business case. And finally, I want to summarize that with any project or program, business organizations have to evaluate how successful they are. Are they successfully being able to work through the expected results they are intending to have? KPIs, or key performance indicators, are vital. A key performance indicator is really utilizing the exact same data we can use through process mining. And it's a measurable value that demonstrates how effectively a company is achieving key business objectives. Are we achieving the expected ROI we're expecting? If not, how is it adversely being affected? One of the key aspects of building up a business case and developing a project or program is once we're modifying or implementing a project, we then have new trackable data inputs. We are now changing a process, we're implementing a new process, and as a result, we need to have defined new trackable data endpoints that we could then use to extrapolate into key performance indicators and to track how successful we're doing. Funny thing is, there's no difference between identifying a business case and the process you go through. To evaluate how successful a new project or program is being implemented, it's still utilizing process mining to be able to take the data and implement it into a usable form for us to be able to understand how well we're doing. For example, if we are not able to achieve our business objectives, so we can always go back and add more data points, right? It goes back to, am I able to achieve what I was able to expect to achieve? And if not, what am I missing? What information am I missing? And how can I be able to apply new inputs or new data to be able to extrapolate why we're adversely being affected through the new process? And then I really say this, I want to extrapolate the data to identify additional area of opportunities. You see the graph that I have up on the screen. It kind of shows different ways we can show to stakeholders how well we're doing. Communicating that progress is very vital to a business and organizational structure. And some people do it weekly, some people do it daily, some people do it monthly or quarterly. However, big investors want to know how well and how much success we're seeing through our new processes and procedures. And that brings me to the conclusion of my brief. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing some of your questions.
Calem, fantastic review and presentation. We really appreciate that. I'm going to ask you to go ahead and stop showing the presentation screen so that I can bring my camera back on. And we have questions from the audience, and also let me just reposition the questions from the audience here so I can see all of them. But the first question I'm going to ask for you is actually a thank you first for going into the basics and fundamentals of building the business case. And because I had alluded to that a bit in my previous session, that sometimes, technology can be a solution looking for a problem. And there are some not so good things about that. And you go through the business case perspective on how you build that and looking to try to understand what the issues are, and really that translation to value creation, which you make a very good case for and establish a flow. Why do you think that organizations and people struggle so much to understand how value is created or destroyed in a process? Because my experience and the experience of our audience reflects that on their questions as well, is that people really struggle to come up with, they tell you what's not working, They may even have some evidence that it's not working. But when you ask them, so what? If we put a team to work on this, what is the annual value creation that we can get out of this? And they like freeze. Why do you think that happens so often in organizations?
I think there's two different aspects of that. A lack of true analysis is one. Maybe the data points aren't exactly what they were expecting. So I would say that a lot of people need to be inclusive. As mentioned before, you have to know where you're wanting to end, right? And what modifications or issues could occur along the way to be able to ensure that your system is built in a way that you can be able to extrapolate that data in a usable form. So if the data is not readily available in a usable form, then you will struggle. You will struggle with being able to identify flaws in your processes. I think you're going to also be able to struggle with, how do I define what profitability or savings could be attributed to these data margins? And you're also going to struggle with the other key thing, is being able to represent it to stakeholders. One thing is analysis. Another thing is getting people to buy into your analysis. And to your point, I think having all this information in a usable format allows it to be a little bit better to use. And the number one thing that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of organizations struggle with, is actually being able to produce it in a usable format to investors. Finance individuals, they really want to see everything driven down to an data analytic perspective, and it's got to be clearly articulated in a format that they can easily digest. And having it in a way that's not usable is going to make that a lot more difficult.
Very well. Do you find that people struggle with having access also to the right data and information, especially the cost data? Organizations can be quite protective. They'll not tell you what is the rate for certain functions, for example, or is the cost of certain products. And even finance organizations can become totally protective of that type of data. Curious if you, two-part question here. Curious if you have experienced some of that, and maybe what are some of the potential workarounds, those barriers?
That's a great question. I think as organization leaders, we have to be open. And open meaning when we are actually staffing to meet the demands of new projects, or refining, or even bringing in consultants, we can't be close-hold with our information. I think a lot of organizations, to your point, don't want to give some of that exclusive material away because it's going to demonstrate that there's flaws. And people don't like flaws. But I think we have to be open and honest with ourselves that these flaws exist in every single business and organization. And our goal as leaders is to be able to prevent those flaws, or at least make adjustments to mitigate some of our profitability or savings loss. And in order to do so, we have to be able to be open with our information. We also have to position people in the correct locations where they have that access. I don't think everybody needs access, but I think the people that are able to build a business cases should have exclusive access to that information, and it should be between each organization to position those people in the right locations.
Very well. Switching to a bit more specific questions that came up related to process mining. On your experience at Staples, of course, your experience in other organizations and industries prior to that as well. As you look at opportunities that are conducive for greater value creation with process mining, is there kind of a profile of what those processes may look like, that you have that there's certain characteristics of the process that make it attractive for process mining applications in your view?
Ooh, that's a hard one. And I would say it's been different per industry. When you're looking at systemic processes, I'd say they should all kind of resemble each other a little bit. What I mean by that is you have an end user input, which is then tying back into an application. That application can tie right back into a database of some sort, which is utilizing fundamental data. And I'd say with inside of that, they can all be resembled the same. And I say, you're really going after time. You're going after time where you're seeing people stop utilizing your application. You're seeing process flows within how they're utilizing your applications. And time is a humongous measure. as well as identifying exception cases that or errors or things that are occurring within your application, which should also be logged and creating some type of delay. But when we're talking about physical processes, that's very difficult. Or manufacturing, where they're dealing with different types of materials and processes there. I'd say they're all very different. And it really takes understanding to a significant level of detail what the process is at the lowest level and how do we measure it. And how do we measure our intrinsic data that's driven at those lowest levels? And I'd say that is very difficult to understand. And I think that's another key aspect about each industry that deals with those physical aspects they struggle with, just because they may not have placed enough input to a systemic driven system to allow us to be able to extrapolate that. I mean, I've been into places where they're still using literally stopwatches to time people, and I'm saying, well, why can't you put some type of buttons or systemic portion where there's feedback from people saying that this portion of the process, rather than relying on timesheets, right? So it's thinking outside the box of how do we use software and technology to leverage those data inputs to perform better.
And how do you approach technology applications and opportunities in an environment like Staples? Do you look at, because there are two fundamental ways of looking at it, right? You have some problems that you may have, and you may and then you may look at potential technologies that could help you solve a problem. The other approach is, I have a technology here like process mining, and I'm looking for maybe an area of the business where I can leverage the technology to create this proportional value. How do you go about identifying and prioritizing process mining opportunities?
Great question. And I think that also ties back into, especially a large organization like Staples, Walmart's, Amazon's, especially in your e-commerce and fulfillment strategies. Supply chain is a very complex unit, and it has a lot of demanding moving parts. And I think one of the things and feedback we get from opportunities is really being in the field at the lowest level, looking at those opportunities and being open to feedback. I think one of the key things that even makes every engineering group is being able to listen. I think being able to listen to what other people are saying about the process. Like, I've been in a cafeteria with some of our drivers and just being able to listen. What things are they talking about that I could think about from a software technology to improve their day-to-day tasks? Or inside of a warehouse, what type of things am I listening to in a break room where these workers are fulfilling e-commerce customers' carts? What things are they complaining about? What are they talking about? Having to input too many different things to basically do a simple task? Are they thinking about taking too many steps to perform a different task? All these things are important. I think listing's step one. And step two is then evaluating as to what solutions could we provide to be able to accomplish that problem. But the problem really comes from the lowest level, I think. And that lowest level is really just who's actually performing the task. That's who we should be talking to.
Very well. Are there any specific areas, maybe if we can be a bit more specific about areas where you're implementing process mining? Of course, understand there's some proprietary things that you can't talk about, but for those things that it's okay for you to talk about, are there areas where process mining are really helping you create value right now, be it in procurement, maybe auditing, maybe e-commerce? Just curious about what are some of the areas of the company where process mining is delivering value for you today?
Completely. So one of the key areas we focus on is, I guess, when we look at what are our opportunities, I go back to where is most of time spent, because what we're trying to save from a fulfillment strategy, and that's where I work in more or less, is the supply chain side, not unless the sales and the marketing side, is I really want to focus on how do we implement autonomous solutions to solve the saving side of things, right? How do we be more efficient inside these large warehouses? Talking about a 1 million+ square foot warehouse with a couple hundreds of people working in these warehouses. They're all doing different processes to fulfill customers' orders. And what I want to look at is what steps are required to perform in each function of a facility. You have receiving, I have the picking strategy. We're actually individually identifying the items required for customers' orders. We have the shipping aspect. We have the transportation. And every single aspect of these processes have a measurable input for us to be able to say, these people are spending this much time doing this allocations. And when I look at that time, I'm going to take the one that we're spending the most amount of time and evaluate, are we the most efficient we can be? And the answer is usually no. So let's tailor that. I'm going to take process mining by identifying how long it takes in between each process the user's having to accomplish a step, which in our case is really the picking strategy, individually fulfilling customers' orders with items. And I want to say, if it takes this many steps to reach this location, I'm literally watching the systemic exchanges between the application that they're using to identify the items, the time they actually grab the items and put it into the customer's order to be delivered, to the time that order is actually received in another part of the facility. All those time calculations are being in effect. And those time calculations, as mentioned earlier, equals saving opportunities. If we can make them more efficient. And all this goes into ideas, for example, do I need to, if we're getting savings, for example, like when we go on sale with different items, if I go on a sale with the different items, I can expect an increase of those quantities of that item being ordered, right? So I want to position that in a way that's in close proximity for a person that's picking that item for that customer to be really close to. I don't want them to walk on the other end of the warehouse. I want it close. So analyzing this strategy as in a physical aspect and aligning it with systemic measures to make it more efficient, that's what we're going after every day.
Very nice, very good view of how you're approaching these opportunities in the organization. What has been I mean, my goodness, you have been doing intelligent automation at the company, not you specifically, but the company has been doing intelligent automation for many, many years. What's exciting in the next 6 months to a year, kind of like the next steps on some of these internal and external improvements and uses of technology? Anything that that's in the horizon that's kind of the next step?
Absolutely. I think whether it be manufacturing or supply chain industry, we're implementing new autonomous methods. And I say this outside of systemic, I want to look at robots, AGVs, autonomous guided vehicles. There are so many physical technologies out there that we're able to utilize to accomplish what we've previously relied on a slew of different employees to manually move things, i.e., I think about how many times or how many workers it takes, skilled workers, labor workers, that have to be able to utilize forklifts to travel up and down these aisles, grab pallets of different product and transport them to another side of the facility. I look at manufacturing, where previously steel was carried by these workers on forklifts and other type of material handling equipment. And now we've got robots moving everything. And autonomous guided vehicles driving these things are based on this. And every single time I'm using some type of robotic measure to move something, I'm adding a new data input to a systemic measure that I can actually go in and utilize process mining for. So I'd say that not only are we actually increasing the amount of data that we have to be able to use for process mining, we're also creating a more simplified solution.
That's fantastic, Calem. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your practical perspectives on intelligent automation for value creation. On behalf of our global community, again, we want to extend our deepest gratitude for you to take the time to be here with us.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, and I really do appreciate the opportunity, and great questions to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Calem Harris, Director of Controls and Automation Engineering at Staples. Some exciting things are happening with intelligent automation and process mining at the company, and as Calem covers so well, and the fundamentals of building the business case for intelligent automation and process mining, very, very helpful as well. So this wraps up day one of Process Mining Live. We are going to set up what's coming up tomorrow. So a bit of a preview here, quickly through the agenda for tomorrow. We are going to have Software AG discussing process and task mining, hybridizing solutions to harmonize insights. Then we're going to move on to presentations across multiple industries, including Twitter. We have Andrew Kirkland, who is a senior program leader at Platform Health Operations at Twitter, who is going to be talking to us about process mining as a digital transformation accelerator. And tomorrow, at the end of the day, tomorrow, we have not one, but two industry leaders coming from the UK. And one is Mark McGregor, and we also have Sofia Pasova discussing with us the process mining. And the title is very suggestive. All that glitters is not gold. Why broadening your approach to process mining is the key to long-term success. We're going to again have Mark McGregor, who is an industry expert in intelligent automation, along with Sofia Pasova, who is the founder and president for Stereologic, on not only a narrow view, not just look at the process mining narrowly, but looking at it broadly in the context of intelligent automation and all the different options that you have, and how do you extract the most value from this potential suite of products and services that exist. So very practical view of the prioritization and implementation of these technologies for value creation at scale. Excited again to welcome these great cross-industry leaders to our program tomorrow. I want to remind everyone that you will receive a recording of all the sessions as a registered participant a week or two after the sessions are completed and the post-production team has worked on the videos. You'll be receiving an email with a link and password to give you full access to each one of the sessions. This is only possible because we have the best sponsors for process mining from around the globe with us. So I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Celonis, Abby, Software AG, and Stereologic, for making it all happen, bringing this level of content and great qualified speakers and industry leaders at no cost to all of us on a global scale. So thank you again, Celonis, Abby, Software AG, and Stereologic, for making this all happen for us. So between now and our first session tomorrow, you can check out our link on LinkedIn for the discussion about the conference, what speakers are saying, what participants are saying. I'm going to put a short update on today's presentations right there under the comment section, and you can find all that information on LinkedIn under my name and the posting that I have for the conference, which is the last posting that I have under my profile. So you should be able, if you have an opportunity to drop by, say hello, say thank you to our sponsors, say thank you to our guest speakers, ask questions to them because they also check that communication. And if you want to connect with them directly right there on that posting. I have the LinkedIn for every one of the presenters on the conference. So it's an easy way for you to connect with them. So for now, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, wherever you are in the world.